Dan White of Valparaiso University. Last week, I got a hit up from Samtec representative, like connectors, to meet up for lunch. And he was in Brazil. So Valparaiso, Chile is what our city is named for long ago. Anyway, I'm in the US, Northwest Indiana, Valparaiso University. My lab is called the Wireless Research and Electronic Discovery Lab. Put an exclamation point in front of it, and it's not wired because we do, it's a terrible name. And then also, I'm a core contributor with Libre Space Foundation for a long time. I've been a little bit inactive with that, but if you've heard of SatNogs, you can talk to me and I can help fill you in. Although this talk really is not related to LSF, it's not even related to the university. It's a survey of kind of what's been going on in history. All right, so from the title, I want to see how open source has been used in the PocketQube community and what that history has looked like and so on. So how do we filter this? How do we know? There's lots of places doing stuff, doing missions that are not explicitly made as open source, commercial stuff. That's great. That's just, so if it's not mentioned, it's because there was no self-designation of open source stuff. We could use an OSI license. We could use GPL, Creative Commons licenses. My criteria was just, are you sharing it? Is the team sharing information? Do you use the word open and sharing with the intent for others to use it? And we'll see how that worked out. So if you call yourself open, another way is searching for this is what's on GitHub, what's on GitLab, what's on project websites, what's on who are the organizations that are related and have been in those orbits. So who are the people out of there? Use some papers. There's one from Vittorio Franzi. I've met him and I can't pronounce his last name, but he had a review paper that came out last year. It had a lot of information in it. It wasn't for open source, but I found out about missions that I'd never heard about. An interesting part of the process of doing this, I use some AI agent stuff. One is an excuse to play around with that because as an electrical and computer engineer, I'm supposed to know about these things if I'm going to teach it. But then also, I wanted it to, just like rigorously find stuff that I didn't know about. I didn't want to miss things and such, and that found a couple missions that I'd never heard about, and that was the whole point of using those, and so on. All right, so here we go. This is the main figure. Colors are kind of families, organizations. The purple are satellites. Many of these have been named, or some of these have been named today already. Kits and satellites are kind of a fuzzy thing, okay? So I go for the rest of this talk is looking at all these groups. So pruning this is we see groups of things and not connections between them, which is I found was interesting. Okay, all right. So next up, or first up, is the original PocketQubes. $50 sat is on the poster here. Out of Morehead State with Bob Twiggs, starting that back in these missions were 2015, 14, something like that. And there was kind of a lull in between for many years, just like startups are. So Eagle, the TU pod, and Unisat 5, those were the carriers for those, I believe. Okay. All right, so we have the original stuff. I actually have a connection, a very small connection to $50 sat, as I got to see the engineering model at Hamvention in 2015, and that was pretty cool. So I'm the photographer, and anyways, it was cool to see that. I was like, you mean you can make satellites this small? This is really awesome. Maybe I'll get to fly one someday in my life. And guess what? I still haven't flown a PocketQube, but we have a similar PocketQube related payload on Transporter 16, and we're very excited about that. So I'll mention that. I did a talk last year about Beacon. Beacon 2 is our first satellite. Beacon 1 is a PocketQube that we've restarted, a 1P, and so on. Super exciting. So that was my first, saw that in 2015. That was the year that Libre Space had a booth. They called themselves more SatNogs than Libre Space at the time, and they didn't even have a booth in the thing. They were out in the parking lot with the selling stuff. What's the whatever the name for that is, and met them there. So that was my first in-person contact with the LSF people, and that was anyway very good memories. And a few years after that, they invited me to be a core contributor. Okay, so we have the PQ60, PQ9 standards. There's the standards for deployable stuff, mechanical interface. I'm really looking at the electrical, the internal interface for what this is. What patterns that are here, the PQ60, there are some designs, very early. Dinos Sat EDU. I don't know any of the people from there, but I did meet Candace Doe from Princeton, at a small sat with a Tiger Cub. And she was using PQ9, but she added a pin. So it's now a PQ10 for the electrical interface. And there was a talk last year about Tiger Cub also, and I think they're preparing to fly a 1P with a SATCOM radio on it too. That's a connection that happened. They didn't have a connection to the original open source EPS power board, but then chose to use that design later. And that's kind of one of the first instances of reuse across teams. So we build our own stuff. We fly a second mission. We'll reuse parts as much as we can, but I'm most interested in this talk is how do open designs get reused by other people that don't know otherwise have contact with that. PQ9, that was kind of the root of the cubic family from LibreSpace, and the two interesting ones are, of course, ours, of course, right? Beacon 1, which is a PocketQube, and then Poquito from University of Luxembourg. And that's also, it's interesting because we talked to them, and that was part of our history of Beacon 1 and Beacon 2 and such, but also because they are one of the first, only kind of independent teams that took the cubic design and made a mission from it without really much other contact. That was interesting. 𝗖cie in early days flew on the that Firefly Alpha flight with the two cubics here, and has published information about that, and they've since gone on to be a commercial entity and such. As far as I can tell, at least from looking, on the internet, that the open source thing isn't a part of their operations now. It's totally fine. I'm just looking at reuse. Has anybody used these things? If you've seen or known, or if you've used these designs as even roots of ideas, that didn't show up in my searching because it wasn't written down, right? But the history of ideas as we come and we see these demonstrations, it's like, oh, that's a really good way of hooking a bus together or so on. It's we'll say a spiritual descendant instead of a technical or, a Git fork sort of level of sharing. Next one, I call this open islands, and that might seem like it's a bad thing. We have 𝗖𝗰 Delphi space has published designs or published things. We have a talk tomorrow about the twins that I'm interested to hear about. So things are published, but as far as say the public record is there's not reuse kind of outside or in other ways. Another interesting part is the PyCubed Mini as the original Prometheus with Carnegie Mellon that got reused with some partnerships, and then also with the Tartan series of PocketQubes as well, and all from Carnegie Mellon, and then the SAT-LLA Israeli student team. This is the first the tools found these. I'd never heard of them. They've built some things, and they have published information. So we'll call it open. And if you know anything more about them, I'd love to add more information to my database of that. So here we go. Next one is Cubic. Cubic came from LibreSpace Foundation as first two, 1 and 2, that blew up. It came back to Earth. I still have yet to see the real hardware myself. They've got it sitting in the lab just as well, and It's really cool. Flew 3 and 4 as copies. There's a 5 and 6. And then spin-off stuff. So those were just copies of the same design from the same organization. It's all open in that way, but is it, how open is it if you're making your own stuff? You know what I mean? Like the sharing part. AMSAT Germany has flown or is flying the 𝗖𝗰𝗁 series of PocketQubes. Those come from the cubic design base and modifications and such as they're doing that. And then LibreSpace has the 𝗖𝗁 series of 𝗖𝗁 mission, which includes some PocketQubes. They had a non-deployable on an Ariane 6 rocket as well as other things, CubeSat version and so on. 𝗖𝗁 stands for Signal Identification and Localization, so an aspect of a non-centralized approach to identifying satellites from coded signals that they broadcast, but an opportunity to yet again fly a 1P for that. The AMSAT Germany connection, one of the team members of AMSAT Germany is also an LSF core contributor, so that's the connection. So that's 1 degree of freedom away from the people that are on the Git commits of the hardware design and the software design. Like, they directly know each other. So that's the connection. The most interesting so I also have the connection with the Cubic series. That's why I had my university student team choose the Cubic as their platform, because I happen to know the people that made it, and if we have questions, we can just escalate directly, which is really convenient. Most interesting to me is the University of Luxembourg. So until I had seen them or seen an ALBA announcement about them flying, I'd never heard of Poquito. No one from LSF had also heard about that and knew that it was getting reused. So very interesting. Part of our story I talked about last year is we called up Luxembourg and we say, hey, you guys are 6 months ahead of us in building a cubic. I might know about it, but my students have no clue. So can we ask you questions on how it went? How does it go to do this actual reproduction from the documentation? It was a great conversation. Things changed. A week later, we are now flying ADCS, Magnet Worker Coil and System, on our Beacon 2 satellite, which is a payload now, and that's on Transporter 16. So we're very excited. Student team is for that, but it's not a PocketQube. See the last year's talk. So yeah, most interesting is Luxembourg's Poquito use of the cubic system. I think there's some more, but it didn't show up in any public place. AMSAT EA with Hydrospace, we heard about them a little bit. I'm not aware of there being a claim to open source for these projects, but the tooling was like hardcore finding nodes and edges in the graph, connecting AMSAT EA, Hydra, all of these to LibreSpace, AMSAT Germany. I think the main reason is those initial missions, or several of those PocketQubes flew on Pico bus deployers from LSF instead. So definitely deserve to mention as not necessarily as reuse, but connections among organizations. Next one, I know I've met some people already from IEEE GRSS associated with that, and I first heard about that work last year, and this would, I'd say, a new independent ecosystem. I'm not aware of any other connections to other designs or reuse. It seems like perhaps a clean sheet sort of design, which is wonderful, and then an attempt through a different means of having intentional reproducibility. The Nanosat Lab as the hardware and such, IEEE is the sponsor, and with the POCAT series, those are about to fly, going. I think there's someone giving a talk about one of their missions that was proposed for this, so very interested in hearing how this is. And another way of reuse, and just a totally different way of reuse. The LibreSpace way is like very much personal connections from the Libre side. This one is educational side. We want to give a platform for people to use, reuse it, and so on. So I'd love to hear more about this. I just know less about it. All right, so to conclude, we say reuse is difficult. And with Hydra, Hydra and other talk, reusing, once you're doing it yourself, right, reuse in that sense is easier. If you've flown yourself several times, up to 13 or 14 PocketQubes now, you really have a nice pipeline. When I say reuse is difficult for this, I really mean someone else using your own designs. There's so much, you just pull a Git repository, perhaps read the documentation, if it exists at all, right? And if you weren't the one that did that, or even directly knows those people, using that information is very difficult. There's so much embedded information and knowledge that's part of flying a complete satellite mission that's not written down. And I want to encourage everyone to write that down, because even if you're on the commercial side, I can give that information to my students to read, who are by definition novices. But the faster that they can come up to speed by learning information, not having to, say, reinvent the wheel and discover all these resources themselves, the faster they can come up to speed. They hit graduation and they're even better, and now they come work for you. And everybody hits the ground running. So it's not really a competition for me. I don't have a commercial interest, but I do really think I would like to maintain my 100% students that do my lab, or that work with me in my lab, are presently, so far, we're still at 100% are in the aerospace industry immediately after graduation. So I would like to keep that up. It benefits everybody, especially in this ramp-up phase where we're kind of short on people. So far, the patterns have been adopt and modify, I would say exemplified by the Pokita one. They took the PQ9 and the cubic design, replaced some boards, had their own chipset that was part of the 1P, and reused it as much as they could to enable their mission. I found the modification with the PQ9 with the Tiger Sat, actually Tiger Cub, with Princeton's as a different approach, different level of reuse and taking ideas. My closing message is, it might see we have these islands that look isolated. They're not as isolated as this graph makes it look. And I think that more islands, more clean sheet designs for PocketQube platforms is actually good for everybody, because we don't just get stuck in a rut. We have lots of ideas. Lots of ideas. There's not just one way to do it. If we talk about off-the-shelf COTS parts for PocketQubes, like, does anybody know where I can buy a comms board for a PocketQube? That's what I thought. So I sense a market opportunity for those that want to do, subsystems, but PocketQubes are so small that it's just so deeply integrated, it's just kind of fundamentally difficult to do that. I want to see more students building things, and I want to lower the bar for students to begin building that. I've had a message just overnight from a student that is trying to come up to speed, and we're bringing another student on. And he's like, what does he need to read next? He read some of the code, and he's like, it's 300,000 lines of code. And he's like a little confused. I'm like, welcome to space. Just be prepared to be confused all the time. And if you take the attitude of, let's just keep our eye on the mission, let's figure this out and learn all the time. And if you don't know, welcome to the club. And more collaboration. So that's my part of being here, even in person at this conference, is to talk to more people, connect other people. I only have 24 hours in today, just like all of us. We've been busy in the last year and a half with the Beacon 2 thing, which is a half-U weird 6-university collaboration. We're getting back to PocketQubes now, and the more people that fly, the more the cooler stuff that we can do. Thank you.